If you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed. What is the long-term effect of too much information?
Information, I just need some information. I've been dying. Is it lack of education? I've been reading without any transformation. I'm addicted. Is it overstimulation? Hey.
Welcome to the Sixth Sense Report.
Hear ye, come one, come all. You're listening to the Sixth Sense Report with Joel Nikoloff and Darnell Samuels.
Bro, we're just keep getting better and better shows with this, man.
Better guests,
no big deal.
I know. So, we have two guests, two wonderful people, Seun and Shopé Adeyemi. Welcome, guys.
Yo.
I would have brought Shayo on, but me and him are beefing. No, I'm kidding. Actually, you know what? Shayo is my favorite Adeyemi brother, actually.
He's my favorite
the one
too.
you knew first, right?
I like him better than I like myself, so.
Oh, man, but I'll just say this.
Smoot Brothers.
I'll just say this. So, you know, Shopé and you have Seun and then you have Shayo. You know, these guys have blessed my life in different ways, and I met them in different stages. So it's really I just want to say I love you guys.
Thank you, bro.
bro.
Yeah, man. I love you guys, and you guys have done a lot for me in my life and all areas of my life. So thank you guys. Shout out to Debo. Shout out to Pops. Like, you know what's crazy? Sorry, man. I'm going on a rant already, but it's amazing how your father and your mom, of course, has 3 boys, and you guys are like awesome people, and you guys are smart individuals. And you know, and some parents can't even get it right once. You know what I mean? But they got it right 3 times. Good looking, family men, talented dudes. Oh man, yo, Debo, man, you firing off, baby.
It took some sacrifice, bro. A real sacrifice.
Well, either way, welcome to the show. For those who don't know you guys, Shopé and Seun, give a background on who you guys are. You can start with Seun. You start first.
My name is Seun Adeyemi. I have been on the show probably 2 years ago now.
Crazy.
What was the episode we did?
Generational wealth.
Generational wealth. Yes,
I'm page for sure.
That's right. I'm a certified financial planner, run my own business. And so, yes. And we all came to Canada in 2000. That's what, 20 years.
Oh, wait, Seun, you also forgot to mention your podcast.
Oh, yes. And I have a podcast, the Dollar Savvy Podcast. And we've been off air for about a year now, but there's a whole bunch of episodes you can go listen to. A few new episodes are coming out soon. So, yeah, I talk about money. I talk about integrating your faith with how you manage your money and just having a heavenly and a scriptural mindset when it comes to money. And so, yeah, you can find it at dollarsavvy.ca.
Cool. And Shopé?
Yes. I have the most frivolous of careers among my siblings. The least consequential. So I'm a recording artist, an Afrofusion recording artist. So people who don't know what Afrofusion is, it blends Nigerian Afrobeat with hip hop and R&B. That's kind of like my cultural and musical identity. So there's the Nigerian side, the Niger side as an immigrant. And then there's the hip hop and R&B side growing up in Toronto. So the music kind of takes on this unique flavor where you have a meshing of these two worlds. So that's kind of like, if I were to think of my operational energy, goes a lot into the business of the music. You get what I'm saying? So I'm the recording artist, but contrary to popular belief, music is more than just having a good time. There's a lot of the business behind it, right? So it's like 90% business, 10% actual music. And so I'm kind of like just building out that business and what that looks like. That would be the majority of my operational energy. And then I dabble in kind of like other businesses and other investments in other industries, because you got to diversify. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to Sean Carter my way to the top. So basically that's kind of what it is, man. Recording artist, but I really just love the thrill of the chase in business in general. So if you got a good deal, send it to me and see if I can do something with it.
That's what's up. Now, look,
And you got a pretty good bro to give you some extra advice when you're making those decisions too, right?
For sure.
Well, my dad taught us well.
Yes.
He
Yes.
taught us well how to be entrepreneurs and, just be go-getters. Don't settle for just a job. Your job is great, but can you build on that? He left Nigeria. We were pretty, from a lifestyle perspective, we were pretty comfortable. And he gave that all up and came to Canada and to start all over again. So it's not enough to just settle for the 9 to 5, at least for us. Myself, my two brothers, we are really hungry entrepreneurs. My brother works. That's not on here. Shia works, but he's also entrepreneur minded. So I think,
but he's an engineer too. So
that's right.
Yeah,
he's an engineer. So he works, but he works a high level job. And we don't want to be classist here or anything, for sure. A job is a job, and there's honor in everything. But if you can push yourself and challenge yourself, then go and excel.
So what was the grounds for, your dad gathering you guys up from a comfortable life in Nigeria to come here?
Well, when I look at it, even though we were comfortable, I think he looked at the trajectory of the economy. He looked at the trajectory of the educational system. He looked at the political climate and said, is this where I want my kids to grow up? Initially, it was actually my mom's idea, because my dad wasn't, he thought it would be nice to go abroad, but he was comfortable. My mom felt that leaving Nigeria would give us better opportunities, would just expand our horizons. So she pushed for it, and he's like, okay, let's do it. And so it's just, he saw all the things that we are seeing now. And when I look back, and it's been 20 years, and I'm like, I'm so glad that that he gave up everything and came here.
Wow. That's amazing, because mom had the foresight to see what was going on. Wow. Okay, well, let's just jump into it in regards to SARS. So what is SARS?
So SARS is a combination of on multiple fronts. There is a frustrations with Nigerians were frustrated. Okay. It first started with, there's a lot of police brutality. There's a lot of cops can just stop you, frisk you, take your stuff, and sometimes it's resulted in lost lives. And so it kind of started on that front with people saying enough is enough. We're tired of just being assaulted and we have no rights. And then that kind of blew up into other parts and other areas of the society, all the frustrations we Nigerians are facing, from the corruption of our leaders to the economy and to the joblessness and to poverty and to just so many injustices and things going on. And people are just fed up and say, we want an answer. We demand accountability to our leaders and to those who we've either elected in one way or another way. They finesse their ways through corruption to get to the top. It's an outcry of Nigerians that this has got to stop.
What's crazy is that, like, when I first saw it trending on Twitter, and I was like, oh snap, SARS is back. And that's what I really thought. I was just like, like SARS, first we got Corona, now we got SARS is back. Like,
funny part it is, Corona is related to SARS.
Oh, it is?
Yeah. It's a different strain of it.
Same type of virus.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, yeah. Well, that's essentially what I thought. But of course, once
Well, I mean, it'd be par for the course. 2020 has been a crazy year. So
yes, yeah. But but of course, you guys already know when you hit that hashtag, it sends you down this trail.
Yeah.
And dog, some of the images I saw, I'm trying to unsee, and just the brutality and the seriousness of the situation. What's your take on it, Shopé?
I mean,
because you've been tweeting a bit about it.
Yeah.
Actually, before Shopé goes into it, I think we should probably define, for those who don't know, what the acronym SARS actually means.
Oh yeah, yes, please do.
Right, it's Special Anti-Robbery Squad. And
okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, Special Anti-Robbery Squad. And so really there was way back in in the 90s, there was a unit that was formed to help because robbery was a big thing in Nigeria. I remember even back home, the way we live, we have like huge houses with huge fences and barbed wires all across it. And
I remember Dad's car was stolen.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that situation, but he was on his way back from work. The gate was open. And all I know is I heard gunshots and they just scurried me somewhere into the living room. And apparently they followed him as he was driving in and they took the car. Thankfully, he was okay. But
That's right.
His car got stolen as he was driving into the crib.
Wow.
We actually found the bullets the following morning right in front of the house. And I look back now and I just thank God for his mercies for saving him that day, because and I remember my dad telling the story was, so as he was driving, back home, most people are chauffeured, at least depending on how wealthy you are. So as the driver drove in, I think he got down right before the driver drove into the house. And then he saw this guy following him as the gate man. That's what we call it. It's who opens and closes the gate, really. That's all that is. And he saw a guy wanting to following him into the house. And so it's almost like my dad had a sixth sense that I don't know this man, there's something wrong. And he already thought, I have my kids in the house. I don't want this guy to follow me into the house, because this robbery is a thing. We've heard of it. People get ambushed. They force their way into people's homes and they rob the family. And sometimes people lose their lives in that. So he had this sixth sense that something doesn't feel right. And so as the gate was closing, he decided instead of going inside the house, he came outside the house and started walking away. And I don't remember the full story, but he started shouting thieves or something. And unfortunately, that day, there was no light, meaning like the electricity was out. Yeah, there was no power. Electricity was out. And so I think he shouted thief or something, and started running away. And so that forced the thieves to shoot. I think I don't know if they shot at him or they shot in the air. I have no idea what happened. But because he raised that alarm, I don't think they were expecting that. And so I think what they ended up doing is just taking the car and it just drove out and it left. So fortunately, he was saved. And also fortunately, they didn't come into the house, because if he had come into the house, there's a chance they would have not just robbed him at gunpoint, but he would have had to lead them into the house where we were. And so, that's a crazy story. And I just honestly look back, I just thank God for that.
Yeah, so the Special Anti-Robbery Squad was developed to combat these kind of scenarios where armed robbery is very common back home. Unfortunately, what's happened over time is that those tasked to serve and protect have become the ones doing the robbing, right? So it's become a rogue police force that, for the life of me, I don't understand how they're still attached to the government, because a lot of the individuals who are in this forces are actually ex-convicts who just go and join SARS, which is really weird. I actually don't understand the politics of the politics of how that works. So it's just really unfortunate, because Nigeria is a very difficult environment to thrive. Right. And so I remember my dad saying to me once, like, if you treat people like animals long enough, eventually they'll start acting like animals. And so you have a scenario where it's so hard to scrape a living. And this is not to justify the actions of SARS officers at all. Far from it. But it does give you some context, whereby these individuals are through a combination of low pay, corruption from their higher ups. Do you get what I'm saying? And just a very difficult environment. They're trying to scrape a living for themselves. So you take that and you mix that in with nefarious, just kind of like sinful, aggressive bully tactics, and you throw a weapon and a badge, and they eventually become the ones doing the bullying. And so it's terrible, because if you look good and you're young, you're a target, right? Because they're thinking, and I know this is how they think, because I was watching an interview with a SARS official, actually one of the superiors, and he says, you look at a young person who is driving a nice car or has a nice phone, and they think to themselves, I've been working as an officer for how many years and I can't afford that phone, you must be doing something illegal. And therefore, that automatically makes any young person who has any kind of nice looking thing, even if you're well put together, it makes them a suspect because they cannot rationalize in their mind how you're young and how you're able to acquire these things. There's that. Then there's also their own desire to kind of like just get whatever you can from this individual. Make a come up, right? And so they proceed to target them and to essentially harass them, which is really sad.
It's so unfortunate because I can see how it would devolve to a situation like this, because you have these police officers who, let's even say there's a budget from up above as to how they get paid, but before the money actually gets to them, all the different from politics and robbery, like all the money gets siphoned by corrupt leaders. And so you have these police officers who are supposed to get paid. Some of them haven't gotten salaries for 6 months, for almost a year.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's rampant corruption. Absolutely.
Yeah. So before their salaries hit them, superiors and different parts of the government, all that money's gone. So even though there's money allocated in the budget for some of these things, the actual people on the road who are supposed to be doing these jobs are not getting paid. So the only way they know how to earn a living is through bribery. And so they stop you for whatever reason they feel like. If you look like somebody that is, like my brother said, well put together, they figure that, okay, not necessarily that you came about your wealth
extortion
from
target.
Yeah, they're just looking and say, this guy's got to have money. So sometimes they can hold you at gunpoint, get you to transfer money to their account. Sometimes they will lead you to the ATM to rob you of whatever money you have. And if you don't cooperate, they'll have a gun. Like, lives have been taken as a result of that. And so, like, there's been so many stories of just people found on the side of the road, people getting beat up by the cops, by all these people. And so you see a scenario where they're trying to make a living, and it's not that I'm justifying it, but the climate is so tense because everybody's hustling. Now add that to the fact that the employment rate is sky high. You have graduates from school. You know, most people, especially my generation, right, were told, go to school, get a job, go be a doctor, or just go to school and read. And once you come out of school, you get a job. And you have people who have degrees upon degrees upon degrees, and they have no jobs. And so what happens? They take to the streets. They have
no jobs because the money that should be invested in economic development is siphoned into foreign bank accounts by government officials. Now, this isn't even theory. This is factual. It's known.
Yo, and we did an episode 4 or 5 episodes ago where we were, I'm trying to find the title of it, where we were talking about, to some extent we touched on foreign aid.
Oh, and Mali. We're talking about what was going on Mali.
Mali coup, the coup there, right? And one of the things that we sort of brought up was, so much of the foreign aid funding goes to the politicians, to the political class, and they have like a disincentive, right? Because if they actually change the structure so that they don't need this money, well, now they're not going to get this funding, and now they start to lose their influence and control and power,
right?
And so there's sort of a poor incentive structure, because this money, for Canada, oh, we look good, we're helping this country, but we don't even really follow up with the fact that the money doesn't achieve the intended purpose.
Right. Unfortunately, such is the story for a lot of African nations, not the least of which is Nigeria. That's why if you go online and you look at, going back to SARS, if you look at the demands, they have 5 demands. One of them is to increase police salary so that they are adequately compensated for protecting lives and the property of citizens. That's one of the demands, in at least trying to alleviate the fact that part of this misbehavior is as a function of these people themselves not even being able to subsist. And then you throw in liquor, cheap drugs, just like an aggressive climate where everyone is just trying to one-up each other. And it's, again, it's such an aggressive climate that you have to be aggressive. You have to be dominant. You have to be domineering in order for anyone to take you seriously, right? You have this situation. The other piece is this. A lot of these individuals in SARS are, how do I say, they're typically not young, right? So they're not adept on the changing economy of the world and how much more possible it is to make money from all over the world, right? If you have an internet, and I'm not talking about scamming, I'm just talking about selling goods online, drop shipping, whatever. It's very easy if you have an internet connection to start an online business, right? Mm-hmm. But this is something that a lot of the young people are hip to. So the individual, the young guy who has an iPhone 11 or who's driving a nice car, who made his money legitimately because he's just taking advantage of the new world, the older SARS officer, that's not a cat. He doesn't understand that because that's not the time he came. He's like, what do you mean? Like, how are you young and how are you making more money than I am when I've been working in this position for this long? Not realizing that in the new economy, you can make money online that's directly deposited into your bank account and you're not depending on your higher ups who are taking 80% of your paycheck anyways. You get what I'm saying? So it's such a broken and such a toxic system that you end up with the police officers becoming the robbers themselves.
Mm-hmm. What I was reading an article from Al Jazeera, and what boggled my mind was the idea that they've essentially so it was based on protests in 2017, they were supposed to be, shutting down this, SARS officers. And then essentially at the end of the year, it sort of came up again, or by December, they reorganized them. And then it sounds like there's sort of been oh, we're going to reform them, or we're going to rebrand them. And it just sort of seems like since 2017 timeframe, there's sort of been this, okay, we're getting rid of it. No, we're not. Yes, no. I don't know. It just seems a bit of a disaster that it's kind of along the lines of what you've been saying, where to some extent, the corrupt officials don't really want this to go away.
They don't. And that's the lunacy of it all, which people are trying to understand, why? This is the conundrum of African nations. We're like, why? It's hard to rationalize how a leader, a president in power, cannot desire the flourishing of your people. It doesn't make sense. And it's hard to conceive of where, this institution, this rogue police force, are a bane on your people's existence, but you do nothing about it. Unless there's some sort of incentive to keep them in place, which is absolutely callous. Do you get what I'm saying? It's very hard to rationalize and understand why SARS has quote unquote been disbanded several times. Yet, there they are still in the streets. We don't understand. Civilians just do not understand why or how this is happening, which unfortunately is the nature of the political system. We know there's a lot of outright corruption, but a lot of it is also buried under layers of bullying, threats, and so many other broken systems.
And unfortunately, most of our leaders, when they get in there, I find that the mindset is, okay, I'm in here for the next 4 years. I got to clean out. I got to take as much money for my family and those who, and whatever. And so you have people who are there once they're in office, then all they're doing is the kids are going abroad. They have accounts in Switzerland. They have accounts all around the world. They're moving money out of the world. So they're using their position to, it's almost like I'm here for 4 years or I'm here for 3 years or whatever your term is. And I got to get as much money as I can. And then that cycle just repeats itself. Nigeria is one of the richest nations in Africa. When I think about the amount of corruption and the amount of resources we have that have been stolen, any Western nation that has lost as much as Nigeria has lost the economy will have collapsed by now. Wow. One of the things we have going in our favor, and it boggles my mind that we cannot use our population to our advantage. I look at a place like China, and one of the things that makes China really successful is that they've found a way to monetize their population. Nigerian population is insane, but unfortunately, we don't have the leaders who have our interests at heart. The leaders are there to. It's corruption is the day.
And it's been like that since the inception of Nigeria, right? Because I'm reading a book. I'm trying to understand, like, how, why? I don't get it. Like, what is it about? No, it's, you know, when you tilt your head sideways and you scratch your head because it defies even asking why anymore. You're like, how? I don't get it. And unfortunately, that's just been the story of Nigeria, right? Since its inception, where it's political self-interest and looking out for number one. And that's sort of like metastasized over the years, which is really sad. So it's baked, it's ingrained into the very psyche of the nation. And the country was birthed into that, and it's just continued.
So I'll give you an example. I have a family friend who developed a technology that provides power. And he took this technology back home to maybe a small city or a small village. And he's like, okay, I want to install this technology here because I want to give back to my homeland. He's here in Canada. He lives here in Canada. He has no business back home, right? So he goes back and says, I want to use this to provide power to this neighborhood or to this small town. And the leaders in the town asked him, how much are you going to pay us to do that? They were bribing him. And he's like, wait a minute. I am not the one that's benefiting from, if you have lights, this helps your lifestyle. This helps you. Like when I think of the business, the amount of money businesses pay just to provide lights to be able to run their business. And so he's saying, I am going to provide this technology to provide this light source, this power source. And the leader said, no, you have to pay us to do that. How much are you willing to pay us? And it's like, I don't have any stake in this. I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things that boggles your mind. But those leaders there are thinking, okay, if this guy provides light, most of these leaders probably have businesses that provide generators, businesses that provide fuel, which we call gasoline, or black markets. They're thinking, oh, I'm just trying to get in their mind for a second is to think, okay, so they're thinking if this guy is providing power source to this village, there goes our other businesses.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would even say it's also the power, right? Like they're protecting their ability to extort.
That's correct. He gave up. He's like, you know what, forget it. And he just came back here.
Yeah. I love Nigeria. I really do. But I'm becoming more and more convinced, it's going to sound really weird, that I don't know if I should say this publicly. I've never said this publicly. that a large number of people in power are going to need to die in order for things to change. And I'm not advocating like
assassination or anything.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying,
or regime change wars from the Americans.
Yeah, there are too many people invested in keeping things the way that they are, that even well-intentioned individuals will be killed. And that's not an exaggeration. They will be killed. Another friend of mine mentioned that he grew up and I remember seeing this massive machine that he never understood what it was his whole childhood. It's like the thing was just in his house and he never knew what it was. He grows up later and he comes to find out that his uncle had fought to create and bring this machine that I think did cardiac surgery, like heart transplant surgeries, okay, to Nigeria, and wanted to essentially develop clinics and hospitals to do so, but he was prevented from doing so, to the point that I believe his wife, there was an assassination attempt on her. Like straight up.
Wow.
And so this $1 million piece of equipment just sat idle in his house for decades. So it's not an exaggeration to say that people who actually desire to see the country grow, to see the people live better lives, they put themselves at grave risk. That there are people who will actually try to kill you if you want to change them, take them out of power, or just spread some of the wealth to the people. And so I love Nigeria, but I don't know how long this is tenable before, God forbid, it becomes an entire failed state. I hope it doesn't. But a number of people need to be forcibly taken out of office.
When I went back home, a lot of my classmates, or some of them that I knew, had began to also get involved in a lot of corrupt dealings. And so,
oh wow,
yeah. And in my mind, I'm like, we keep saying the next generation, but the next generation now is also now corrupt, that by the time they become the leaders, we perpetuate the same thing over and over again.
Well, it sounds like it's one of the only there's so much corruption that like it's sort of a natural progression for so many people.
And so the new generation there has to be a paradigm shift. There has to be a mindset shift that we want to get into office, but in getting into office, we have to be willing to root out corruption. And this is one of the saddest things when the current president's before his term, he was so he's in his second term. Before he became president, he was head of state way back when Nigeria was under military rule, right? Now, one of the hallmarks of his tenure was that he was an anti-corruption guy. He was one of those guys. He had different things he put in the different policies that he helped root out corruption. And so now when the democracy came back to Nigeria and he ran, maybe 6-7 years ago now, the idea was that, okay, we're hoping that now that he's going to be a democratic elected president, the same anti-corruption leader that we thought he would be who we're getting. And unfortunately, his presidency has been a disaster. Matter of fact, it's almost like he's almost like a figurehead. He's not getting anything done. And it's so sad and it's so unfortunate that in the last 6-7 years of his presidency, I feel like corruption has worsened. And I think that's where Nigerians are now, getting to the point that enough is enough. We want change. And Shopé, do you have the 5 demands there that the End SARS campaign, what they were asking for?
Number 1 is immediate release of all arrested protesters. So the arrested protesters. Number 2, justice for all deceased victims of police brutality and appropriate compensation for their families. Number 3, setting up an independent body to oversee the investigation and prosecution of all reports of police misconduct. Number 4, in line with the new Police Act, psychological evaluation and retraining. This is to be confirmed by an independent body of all disbanded SARS officers before they can be redeployed. And number 5, increase police salaries so that they are adequately compensated for protecting lives and property of citizens. Living in Nigeria is a traumatic experience, and I'm very, very convinced that all Nigerians are suffering from some degree of PTSD. And I don't mean that as an exaggeration. I don't. It's truly a very difficult place to live. So you have broken and twisted minds, unfortunately, replicating the system. And that's shown to your point. Like, yes, the new generation has to make the change. But this is what I mean when I say, unfortunately, because we live in a fallen world, you will be hard pressed to find a revolution that hasn't come at the expense of human lives. I just don't know that it's possible. It's very sad. And it's kind of convenient to say that because I'm a Nigerian who's living in the Western world. So there's a good chance that I may not have to sacrifice my blood. You get what I'm saying? But for the new generation to make a change, there has to be space made for them to make a change, right? So a well-intentioned individual is going to go there and realize that, shoot, like the chips are stacked against me. You get what I'm saying? So it's almost as though multiple things need to happen at the same time. And this is what makes it so difficult. So difficult. Education, infrastructure, healthcare, policing. It's like major things need to happen at the same time. So who are the top 5 people in these 5 positions? They all need to go, and they all need to be replaced by new, fresh thinking, selfless leaders. Do you get what I'm saying? Because if one position is replaced, the other four are just going to stifle that new guy. So like, is there actually, will any change be created? Do you get what I'm saying? That's what makes it particularly challenging, because there's so many cogs in the wheel that are broken that need to be fixed. But there's so many figureheads. There are so many beneficiaries of the current broken system that you are literally fighting a mountain to bring about any kind of change.
One of the positive side benefits, and I don't know whether to call this positive, but you get my train of thoughts in a second, is Nigerians are one of the smartest people in the world. Like, one of the things I find is those that immigrated from Nigeria, first generation, second generation, if you look into every field, you will find Nigerians in there. And a byproduct of that is when you grow up in an environment where you have to hustle like crazy just to survive, when you make it out of there, that hustling is a part of you. And so you make it to the Western world where you have a higher chance of success. You have light, you have food, you have institutions, and you have avenues to better yourself. Then you're more likely to succeed. And I even think back as when we came to Canada in 2000, when I look at the honor roll, when I look at the top list of the students there, they're Nigerians. And why is that? Well, back home, when you're studying for exams, you're studying under a candle, you're studying under a lantern. No, for real. You are up at night. You're hot. There's mosquitoes. You're studying under hard conditions, and then you come to Canada where there's light. There's food in the fridge. You don't have to worry about getting shot. You don't have to worry about the crazy, we call it go slow, traffic jam. Back home, you're more likely to succeed. And that's why I know Nigerians, we have it in us. We're some of the smartest people. If those smart people are able to get into positions of power, I know there is hope. There is hope. We have we have talent. So that's not even the question of do we have the capacity? We have the capacity to. It's just there needs to be change, and the right leaders need to begin to take their place, really.
Yeah, honestly, this sounds like a daunting task, and in the sense, like when Shopé was reading off the demands for change, the demands for change. Yes, yeah, I know. Demands for change. The first one was to release all those who were being held captive. And I was reading about that and hearing stories about, like people being kidnapped and being tortured and so forth. And I can't imagine. And I'm sitting here and I always try to put myself in other people's shoes. So what if I'm a Nigerian and I live in Nigeria and I have a passion in me to see righteousness done, but I'm like, but I don't want to get kidnapped. I don't want to be tortured. My mom not to see me again because, I'm going to open my big mouth and speak, truth to power.
Have a podcast.
Yeah, whatever, write a song, whatever the case is. Like I'm sitting here and I'm shaking in my boots.
Which is why I applaud the people back home. And
most
definitely. I try to be careful with how I speak because I understand that I have the liberty of not living there, of not facing those repercussions, but they don't. You get what I'm saying? And I never presume to. Like, I'll always take second fiddle to somebody over there who's fighting the same fight. Because as far as I'm concerned, their voice is more powerful than mine.
Oh, I didn't even ask you guys this, but do you guys have family back home?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah. We still have family. My sister and her family are back home. I have two nieces, and
hope they're not listening. Hope the feds ain't listening.
But my sister and her husband, they run a business, and I remember when I was talking to her about this, she's like, you know what? We are doing the best we can to support those who are protesting. So some of the things they would do is they would take food, they would take refreshments, because people actually camped out. I don't know if you knew that, like the protesters, like now imagine a situation where in different pockets of the city, you have thousands, millions of people just, we're not going anywhere. We're just going to sit peacefully and life is not going on as usual. So think about, let's talk about Canada for a second. Okay. So think about, let's even break it down to GTA. So think about millions of people around the 401. Everybody just sitting there. How are you? You know, people are sitting there, people are camping there, people have their beds, people have, there's megaphones and microphones, and people are eating, and people are saying, we're not going anywhere. And you have that downtown Toronto, you have that at Yorkdale, you have that at Scarborough Town Center, you have in different pockets of the city. So you can't really just say I'm going to work or life literally stops. Now imagine that on a bigger scale. It's in Kitchener, it's in Waterloo, it's in Calgary, it's in Alberta, it's all around the country. That's how powerful that movement was. And my sister kept telling me, honestly, all we can just pray for us because we're tired of it. We're working like crazy. We're doing the best we can. But it almost feels like we're not getting anywhere because all the resources and all that we have is being taken by corrupt officials.
And I've never seen, as pessimistic as it sounds, not pessimistic, rather as daunting as it sounds, it's kind of encouraging because I've never seen the populace this energized before. Corruption is not a new thing in Nigeria. Protest is not a new thing in Nigeria. Fela has been singing about this. Again, this has been since the inception of the country, right? Since independence in 1960, it's sort of been like this. However, I haven't seen the populace as united, because one of the things that makes Nigeria, and this is one of the roots of the corruption, is there's a lot of inter-tribal warfare, right? Where different tribes are looking out for their own self-interests, and so
I'm sorry, Shopé. Can you clarify, like, what do you mean by tribes?
So the plot of land that we currently call Nigeria, like if you think of those borders, those artificial borders that our friends kind of gave us, that plot of our non-melanated friends gave us. Okay, all right. That plot of land before the borders was home to about 300 ethnic groups. 300. That's no exaggeration. There are three main ones: Yoruba, Igbo, and Hausa. But then there are a bunch of other ones: Edo, Kari, just a bunch of other ethnic groups. So these are
Fulani.
Fulani, exactly. So these were different groups with different systems of government, with different belief systems, with different ideologies. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful.
And so
I didn't know that.
Different ethnic groups, and they had. It wasn't perfect, but there's no part of the world that's perfect. Do you get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But there was obviously like inter-tribal warfare, and one group would raid another group and sell them as slaves to the Europeans. Like, it wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but there was a working system whereby they traded with one another, they lived amongst one another, but they were their own groups, their own ethnicities. Our friends come and say, no, you're all one country now, and we're going to be your overlords. At some point in time, Nigerians decide the three main ethnic groups, which are Yoruba, the Igbos, the Hausas. So what happens is this: eventually, the British, they cede power in the nation, independent nation, and this is the best scenario. Imagine when, you have kids, right? Any parent who has kids know that if the two kids are bickering and going at each other, once mom and dad are in the room, they're going to be quiet. But the second mom and dad leave, what happens? They go back to killing each other. Do you get what I'm saying? That's exactly what happened in Nigeria. You know what I'm saying? Big Brother was here to maintain some level of, hey, at the end of the day, an enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? But eventually what happens is The British leave, Nigeria gets their independence, and all of a sudden everybody remembers it's like, all right, I hate you. You know what I'm saying? And so what happens is that you now have intertribal warfare where now like, okay, they left. Who's in power? You're in power? What about my people? And so that's how Nigeria was started, where you had coups and violence and war between the different ethnic groups, right? I say that to say this. Intertribal conflict is not new to Nigeria, which is what makes the SARS movement so powerful, because across religions, across tribes, across classes, this is probably the first time I've ever seen a mass number of Nigerians agreeing about one thing.
So organized too.
In such an organized fashion. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, Igbo, yeah, Hausa, yeah, Yoruba, it didn't matter. You get what I'm saying? You're Christian, you're Muslim, it didn't matter. And so that's why it seems promising to me, because I've never seen Nigerians this united and this energized about something. So I want to hope, and I want to believe that we're going to take the energy from that protest, from the movement rather, and begin to put it into tangible efforts. And I'm hearing of some things that are currently happening, which are encouraging to see. And I just hope they're sustained and ultimately lead to the Nigeria that we want to see.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for me, one of the things that sort of crosses my mind is sort of wondering, and this is sort of the part of the insurmountable task, is it seems like the idea of violating another person's rights when it's done by a government official has no means of repercussions or consequences being enforced.
None.
And I just, you know, my thought is like, how do you change that? Like your point about revolution and bloodshed to some extent seems like the only way, because you essentially need to replace those who are unwilling to, you know, punish their fellow corrupt official. Because
you just offer him a percentage of your cut and then he turns a blind eye. Because at the end of the day, it's a tough country. So if I can be taken care of at least, then sure, that's fine. There's something, it's a slang that we use. We call it the national cake. And the national cake refers to kind of like the country's allotment of money. So you hear Nigerians say, I must get my piece of the national cake, meaning that I have to get my slice.
Okay.
I have to get my slice by any means necessary. So it's very hard to find those individuals who are willing to say on the basis of principle, I'm going to stand against corruption. On the basis of principle, I'm not going to be bribed. I'm not going to be compromised. And if you take that stand, there are some people no longer walk the earth because of those stances that they took. That's just a fact. They don't. They're not here anymore. It seems insurmountable, Joel, to be honest.
For things to change, there have to be more people willing to say, I am not going to look the other way. And I demand accountability. And you cannot pay me to look the other way. Because that's really what happens a lot of times. There are people who are there, they're supposed to hold people accountable, but they are paid to look the other way because they themselves are not being compensated as it is enough for what they do. And so if you're going to pay me to look the other way, then sure, I'll look the other way. So there have to be more people willing to say, I'm not going to look the other way. And the monies and the allotments and all those things that are being budgeted for different things have to actually make it to where it's intended to go.
Mm-hmm. It's this sort of is kind of random, but what you're saying reminds me of my dad's solution for the lying politicians that we have to deal with, and that is pay them all $5 million, and when they lie,
well, Shopé, it makes me think of it's going to take a lot of people who have character, men and women, brave people who are willing to put their lives on the line, because that's the only way I can see change come about, is that, people are going to stand up for truth and they will have to pay for it with their lives.
Yeah.
And their bloodshed will, kind of like the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church type of saying, where people are have had enough, because just like you have people who are protesting and doing a peaceful protest, on the flip side, I'm sure on the flip side, there's some other people on the other side saying, okay, you know what? Forget all this peaceful nonsense. We gonna grab some guns and we're gonna raid the place and just take them out. We're not going to sit here and wait for Jesus to come back type thing.
Right.
And then it creates a cycle, and then it creates the cycle, right?
Exactly. And that's why it starts with leadership, right? Because I have a theory that in order for Nigeria to change, you need to change the politicians, the pastors, and the people. But I start with the politicians, right? And I say pastors because religion is a big tool of control. I want to say bad religion is a big tool of control in Nigeria. But as far as I'm concerned, it starts with leadership, because you're absolutely right. If you take somebody who is just looking to usurp power, not for the purpose of serving the people, but to raise themselves out of poverty, you're just going to create the same cycle, which is what Nigeria has been to date, right? So you literally need to change the leadership, because the leadership then sets the tone for Nigeria. It then sets the tone for the people. People act aggressively in Nigeria because that is what it takes to get things done, because that is all they have ever known. Do you get what I'm saying? But imagine a world where a guy knows that I've had to shout, kick, scream, punch in order to get something done. But instead, there's a policy in place now where I have this and I don't have to do all those things. You know what I'm saying? It's going to take there's a mass psychosis over the nation, which is a function of the degeneration of the country. And I put that squarely at the feet of the politicians. They are the ones who've been responsible for stewarding the wealth of the country, and they have siphoned it out of the country and created conditions of abject poverty, so people have no choice but to become aggressive. Do you get what I'm saying? And I was talking to a friend of mine. He says this is where he feels as though the diaspora is going to be an important part of this, because
who defined diaspora for those who don't know?
Diaspora are individuals who are not living in their native land. So Nigerians in the diaspora are Nigerians who are living in other parts of the world other than Nigeria, right? So a friend of mine was positing that he feels as though those in the diaspora are going to be crucial in some way, shape, or form, whether they're the leaders or they just serve in an advisory role. Like, they're going to be crucial in the development of Nigeria, because what we have is the benefit of seeing a system that works. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, this system isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. No system is, but we know what it's like to have law and order. We know what it's like to have a working democracy. We know what it's like the rule of law. We know what it's like to have how to grow an economy. Back home, unfortunately, there's a reason. There's a reason these politicians send their kids to international schools, because they know, right? They know the West has figured out something. They know that our non-melanated friends figured out something. You get what I'm saying? And so,
you know what pains me? I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. What pains me is that there are many Nigerians in diaspora who have gone back. And I know somebody who went back a few years ago, I'm talking maybe 10 years ago, with the same intentions that, okay, how can I give back to my country? And he was killed. And for me, this is, and I don't know if I've said this publicly, but one of the things that for the last maybe 10 years has been hurting me so much is, as much as I love Canada, sometimes I look and I say, I have so much gifts, I have so much talent, I really wish I could pour this into my own country. But I know that the conditions for me to do that are not there, because I'm going to look and say, how do I feed my family? Can I protect my family? Can I give them a standard of life that they are accustomed to? Can I give them good education? I don't want them growing up in a corrupt system that corruption is the norm. And so, yes, tying it back to what Shopé was saying, was that yes, Nigerians in diaspora will play a big part in it. The flip side also is that conditions have to be, the leaders have to create conditions where Nigerians in diaspora are willing to come back home and say, let's go rebuild our country.
Right. So, and to that point, this is where I'm thinking about it. I'm not sure I've landed on it right perfectly. But if you look at China as the model, right? 40 years ago, China wasn't the superpower that it is right now. But how did they get to where they are right now? China has a strong sense of cultural identity. Do you get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so there's a desire to elevate the Chinese ideal, the Chinese individual. And so the government was able to unite and say, okay, let us create conditions that are conducive, some would argue, conducive to our students coming back home, whether that's ensuring that they have jobs, right? And ensuring that they have a standard of life. Some would say they force their students back home. That's neither here nor there. Granted, they have a different political system. Mm-hmm. So, but notwithstanding, go learn what you can about the West, bring it back here, and then let's develop. The problem with Nigeria, and the more I think about it, the more I'm settled on this, is that Nigeria is too tribalistic. And this is where I think the diaspora comes in. Westernized Nigerians don't care for their tribes to a degree. Mm-hmm. We don't care that I'm Yoruba and you're Igbo. That doesn't matter to me. Not to the degree that it matters to those at home. Do you get what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because again, that is how Nigeria was born. Listen, this is what happened, okay? Nigeria got independence. The north was the Hausa, the west was Yoruba, the east was Igbo. 3 main parties, you know what I'm saying? I think the NCNC, the AG, whatever, 3 different political groups ran an election. There was no clear majority. What happened was in the north and the east, they unified and created a bloc so that they could get the power. And then what did they do? They put themselves in positions of power. A few years later, what happened? There was a coup. And so think about it, the north and the east united. And not too long after that, the East betrayed the North. And that's how the military government came into play. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, at the very inception of the country was tribal wars. And I'm not saying that's the only reason, but at the very beginning, there was a ravenous sense of self-interest. So that if we want to say, how can we elevate the Nigerian ideal? How can we elevate Nigerians? Well, first of all, we have to get over the fact that you're Yoruba and Igbo and Hausa. How about we just talk about the fact that we're Nigerians? Do you get what I'm saying? And until we can cross that Rubicon, cross that threshold, it's going to be very difficult to unite Nigerians around a sense of oneness, which is what is necessary to actually begin to think of elevating our people, to do what China's done. Do you dig what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. The more I think about it, the more I feel as though this is at the root of it. Just we are unfortunately a disparate group, which is really weird to consider that. It's really weird to think about that. Because no matter what part of the world you go to, they're going to be like tribes.
Yeah, most stuff.
Yeah.
Most stuff.
And going back to your thought, I think Nigerians in diaspora, I mean, when I see another Nigerian, I don't think, I met this Yoruba guy. Or I met this Igbo guy. No, I met this Nigerian.
Who's a Nigerian?
And there's a connection because you're Nigerian. And I think Nigerians back home have to, especially when it comes to power, have to recognize that. Because the reality is, though, the regular people, for the most part, will live together in harmony. Like you have a Yoruba guy, a Hausa guy in the same compound. The Igbo guy is also speaking Yoruba because he learns it. And one of the things I was talking to my friend the other day, one of the things I loved about Nigeria is we're so different in some of our cultural leanings, but we can really get together. But when it comes to power and position, political power, all of a sudden there's a disconnect. Mm-hmm. And it's so weird. All of a sudden there's a disconnect where, no, we want a Yoruba president. We want an Igbo president. We want a Hausa president. But to the common folk, like, we get along very well. Like, we are amiable people. And we have to get over that idea that, oh, the next president has to be from this part of the country, or the next president has to be from this part of the country to placate this group or that group. We have to get beyond that.
That's how a lot of leadership positions are decided, unfortunately. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's hard to unify, and that's why the Nigerians in diaspora who don't care what tribe you're from. We just know, oh, you're Nigerian and it's tough to live in Nigeria and want to elevate Nigeria. Great. Those are the people you need to get into positions of power because they don't care what tribe you're from. They just care about elevating the country. You know what I'm saying? Because I think that tribal, what do you call it? That, what's the word I'm looking for? That tribal focus metastasizes into individual focus. So you have two plays at work, right? I'm looking out for my tribe and I'm looking out for my family and I'm looking out for me. Over the years, right? But if we can eliminate that, then it's at least a little easier to begin to think of us as a collective unit.
Well, and I just think of like, you know, the idea of like a meritocracy where like, you know, the fact that these things can just be taken away from you through exploitation sort of prevents people from focusing on, you know, let's say the entrepreneurial side of serving my own needs by serving others through entrepreneurship, because you've always got to worry about the SARS guy coming along and taking everything you got.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Wow. This was really good, guys. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Shopé, for your insights. For the listeners who want to get in touch with you guys, how can they get in touch with you guys?
For me, you can find me at sacapital.ca. If you go on the website there is a button there. You can connect with me from there. You can also find my podcast at dollarsavvy.ca. And you can connect with me from there as well. On Facebook, it's SA Capital Advisors. On Twitter is SA Capital Canada. On Instagram, it's SA Capital Canada. And yeah, you can connect with me from there.
www.allofshopé.com. So ALLOFSHOPE, allofshopé.com. And I am All of Shopé on all social platforms. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. But yeah, All of Shopé is the hub, and it just sort of points you to all the other social platforms.
Cool. And I'll make sure to put all that in the show notes page.
Yeah. And definitely, thanks again, guys. This is definitely something that I'll definitely be praying more about. Yeah, as for me, as a non-Nigerian guy, my mom is Trinidadian, my dad is Jamaican, born here. But, you know, as a black person that's not Nigerian, sometimes you feel a disconnect where you're kind of like, you know, well, that's Nigeria. I'm not from Nigeria. So, but on a humanitarian level, it definitely, you know, hits the heart, and especially, and as a Christian, you know, bearing each other's burdens as my Christian brothers in Christ. I hear your guys' burden, for your country. I definitely want to bear that burden as well in prayer and financial support or wherever you can help.
Yeah. I really believe the reason Nigeria is not a failed state yet is because, number one, there's a resilience to the Nigerian spirit that's second to none. A little biased, but I see it time and again. I do believe we also have a vast resource pool, so it hasn't run out yet, thankfully. And number three, there are just too many people who care. You know what I'm saying? Like Nigeria, we're a population of 100 million people. Like, we're not a small country, right? We're not a small country by any stretch of the imagination. And so that's the reason we're still fighting. And I will say this as well. All things being equal, it kind of dawned on me the other day that Nigeria is not that old. Like, it's not that old. You know what I'm saying? It's 60 years old. You understand what I'm saying? Like, we would hope to have gotten our stuff together in 60 years, but it really dawned on me that when I was born in 89, okay? And this was kind of like a revelation for me. The country was only 29 years old. Like my dad was born pre-independence, and he's literally watched the transfer from British rule and every step of the Nigerian political system, from the first prime minister, Tafawa Balewa, to the coup that resulted in the military government, to the coup that sustained the military government, to the civilian government, to the other. And it dawned on me like, yo, Nigeria is actually quite young. So there's hope that, at least compared to other countries, if you look at how old other countries are, Canada's over 100 years old, something like that. The US at 150, right?
Yeah, 150.
Sorry, 150.
Or more than 150.
Right, we're 60 years old. You know what I'm saying? So we're still kind of a young country. I just hope we can get it together sooner than later. So that's at least a little piece of encouragement for me.
Yeah. Any final words, Sean?
No, just we have really gifted people. We have really, really, really great people, and I believe there's hope. I really believe there's hope. So, if you're Nigerian and you're listening to that, I think have hope. And if you're not Nigerian, pray for us. And yeah, just keep us in your prayers. That's the best thing you can do.
Good.
Thanks again, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having me.
But you heard me? Does that make sense?